The last thing Stephen remembers is the feel of a spell going wrong. Not a small mistake. Not a simple slip. This was the kind of wrong that grabbed the room and pulled. A ring of light hung in the air in front of him, but it didn't behave like his portals. The edge didn't stay steady. It shook like a doorframe made of water. Stephen's hands moved out of habit. A shield came up fast. The cloak of levitation snapped tight around his shoulders like it was bracing for impact. "Stay with me," Stephen told himself under his breath. He tried to close the ring. The ring answered by opening wider. The air changed. It got colder. Not New York cold. Not winter cold. This was wet cold, like a soaked jacket pressed to skin. Then the floor was not under him anymore. He fell through the ring like he was dropped out of reality. For one breath. There was nothing. No sound. No light. Just pressure. Then there was a hard slam and the smell of pine. Stephen hit the ground on his side in a forest that was too dark and too quiet. Mud soaked his coat. Cold rain tapped against leaves in his face. The cloak yanked him up before he could even push. Stephen got to one knee. He scanned fast. Tall trees, thick shadows, no streetlights, no sirens, no city hum. His senses reached out. He felt life in the distance. Deer, birds tucked away, a human heartbeat far off, and something else, fast, cold, not human. A blur crossed the trees. Stephen's shield snapped up on instinct, a golden disk of force, clean and solid. The blur hit it like a car hitting a wall. A figure skidded back across wet leaves, feet digging grooves into the forest floor. Pale skin, dark hair, eyes wide with surprise. The figure stared at the glowing shield as if it made no sense. Stephen did not lower it. "Stop," he said, firm and sharp. "Do not come closer." The figure's head tilted, listening, not to Stephen's words, to his body. Stephen felt it. The way those eyes tracked his pulse, his breath, the warmth in his veins. It was not lust. It was hunger, chained down by control. The cloak fluttered, bristling like an angry cat. Another blur appeared, then another. Two more pale faces in the rain dark. Stephen's shield held steady. His posture did not change. He was tired, wet, and not in a mood to negotiate with something that moved like a bullet. One of the newcomers, a small blonde woman, stepped forward slowly. She moved like a dancer who could turn into a storm in 1 second. Her eyes flicked over him, and the cloak, and the glowing circle in the air behind him that was still fading. She swallowed. Her voice was light, but her face was tight. "You fell out of thin air," she said. Stephen kept his gaze on all of them, not just her. "Where am I?" the dark-haired one answered. His voice was calm, but his body was ready. "Near Forks," he said. Stephen blinked once. "Forks?" He said it again, like he was testing if it was a joke. The blonde woman looked past Stephen, into the trees, like she was seeing something that was not there. Then her eyes narrowed, and her smile dropped. For a moment, she looked afraid. Stephen noticed that fear. It did not fit someone that fast. "What did you see?" he asked. She shook her head, like the answer didn't hold shape. "It's broken, like a picture tearing. I saw you somewhere else." And then it went blank. The dark-haired one stared at Stephen's face, as if he was trying to read a book that kept changing pages. Stephen felt it like pressure at the edge of his thoughts. Someone probing. Stephen's expression hardened. "Don't do that." The dark-haired one froze. His eyes widened, like he hadn't expected Stephen to notice. "You can tell," he said quietly. "I can tell a lot," Stephen replied. Rain slid off his shield in streams. He lowered it just enough to show he wasn't trying to start a fight, but not enough to be careless. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," Stephen said, "but I will defend myself." The blonde woman looked at the cloak, which was hovering behind Stephen's shoulder like a loyal guard dog. "It's alive," she whispered. "It has opinions," Stephen said. The cloak gave a proud little flap. The dark-haired one took a careful step back, then glanced to the side. Stephen followed his gaze. More shadows at the tree line. Not pale this time. Large. Moving in a low, tense way, like animals that understood war. Stephen's skin prickled. A standoff was forming around him, and he didn't even know the rules. Stephen felt the air again. That thin, wrong pull. Like a small tear in something that should not tear. His eyes lifted to the black canopy above. He spoke like he was naming a problem in surgery. "This world has a crack in it," he said. The blonde woman's face tightened. "What do you mean?" Stephen did not answer right away, because he could feel it getting worse, and because he was starting to understand, in the simplest way, that this place was not built to handle what had followed him through. Edward Cullen stayed very still. That was the first rule of survival, when your instincts screamed at you to move. The man in the rain was human. His heart was beating. His body was warm. And yet Edward's senses kept colliding with something that was not human at all. The cloak moved on its own. It floated. It reacted to the world like a living thing. And the shield. Edward had met strong things before. He had met hard things. He had met things that could break bones like twigs. But that shield did not feel like strength. It felt like a law. Edward had hit it with his full speed without thinking. A reflex, a test, and the shield had told him no. The man's eyes were sharp, not scared, not confused, not really. More like annoyed. Like someone woken up in the middle of the night. His thoughts were worse. Edward reached for them and felt layers. Not hidden thoughts like lies. Something else. Like the man's mind had doors. Too many doors. And behind them, strange lights. Edward had never felt anything like that. When the man said, "Don't do that," Edward had known, instantly, that he was not dealing with a normal human. Alice's face had changed. Alice didn't scare easily. Her fear was rare. That made Edward's chest go tight. And then Edward heard it. Wolves. Not just one. A pack. Their feet were soft, but Edward could hear the tension in them. He could smell the wet fur, the heat, the anger. Great. Of all places. Of all nights. Edward met Alice's eyes. Alice's gaze flicked toward the human stranger again. Her lips parted, like she was about to say something. Then she stopped. Her visions were failing. That never happened. Edward turned back to the stranger. "Forks is a small town," he said, keeping his voice even. "You should come with us. It's not safe here." The stranger studied him with a look that made Edward feel like he was being examined. "Not safe because of you," the stranger said, flat. Edward didn't deny it. "Or them," the stranger added, glancing toward the wolves. Edward's mouth tightened. "Also them." The stranger's cloak twitched, like it didn't like that answer. Edward tried to keep the moment from tipping. One wrong move, and the treaty line would become meaningless in seconds. Alice stepped closer again, forcing brightness into her voice. "Hi, I'm Alice." The stranger hesitated, just a fraction. Then, carefully, "Stephen." Edward locked onto that. Just a first name. No last name. No title. Edward watched Stephen's hands. They were steady, not shaking, not injured, even after falling out of the air. Stephen's eyes swept the trees again. Edward saw the exact moment Stephen noticed how close the wolves were. Stephen's shoulders didn't tense. His posture stayed controlled, but his attention sharpened. Edward had seen soldiers act like that. Stephen wasn't just powerful, he was trained. Alice lifted her hand slightly, a peace signal. "Stephen, can we get you out of the rain? We can talk somewhere safer." Stephen looked up at the sky like he blamed the weather personally. Then he nodded once. "Fine," he said. "But everyone keeps distance." The words were calm, but the meaning was clear. Try something, and he will end it. Edward realized, with a strange, cold twist, that for the first time in a long time, he was grateful for Carlyle. Carlyle would know how to speak to someone like this, and if Carlyle couldn't? Edward glanced toward the wolves again, then Forks was about to become a very loud place. Sam Yulee was already running when the news reached him. Not spoken news, not texted. The kind that moved through the pack like a shock. Something had fallen into their forest. Something cold was near the Cullens. Something else was with it. Something that didn't smell like vampire or human or wolf. Sam's jaw clenched as he shifted. Bones moved. Heat surged. Fur came like a wave. He hit the ground on four paws and tore through the rain, pack behind him. He didn't need to see to know where the conflict was forming. He could feel it in the way the forest held its breath. By the time they reached the edge of the clearing, the Pale Ones were already backing away, guiding the human stranger deeper into Cullen territory. Sam's lips pulled back from his teeth. Not because he wanted to attack right now, because he could not afford to guess wrong. If the outsider was a threat, they needed a plan. If the outsider was a weapon, the Cullens might try to use him. And if the outsider broke the balance, humans would bleed first. Sam stopped at the treaty line and stared through the rain at the retreating group. The stranger turned his head for 1 second and looked right at Sam. Even from that distance, Sam felt it. Not fear. Assessment. Like the stranger was counting the pack, measuring their speed, and filing it away. Sam's instincts screamed danger, but it wasn't the same warning he got from vampires. This was like staring at a cliff edge and knowing the fall would be final. Sam didn't chase, not yet. He looked at his pack, then back at the line. "Watch," Sam said through the bond. "Simple. Clear. We do not rush in blind." In the distance, thunder rolled. But Sam knew that sound. That wasn't thunder. That was the world shifting. Carlyle Cullen opened the door before Edward even reached it. He had been reading in the quiet living room when the change happened. Not a sound, not a smell. A feeling. Like the house had been placed under a question mark. Then Edward and Alice appeared in the doorway with a human stranger between them. Carlyle's eyes took in details in a single glance. Soaked clothes, mud on the knees, no visible injury. A strange red-lined collar under the coat. A cloak that moved as if it had muscle. And the man's face. Hard lines, tired eyes, a kind of focus that doctors recognized. Carlyle stepped forward with calm hands. "Hello," he said gently. "I'm Carlyle." The stranger's eyes flicked over him. "Stephen," he said again, same as before. Carlyle nodded. "Please come in. You're freezing." Stephen's gaze moved over the room in a controlled sweep, as if checking exits, corners, windows. Then he stepped inside. The cloak followed like a loyal shadow. Carlyle watched Edward carefully. Edward looked tense, but not panicked. Alice looked shaken. That worried Carlyle more than anything. "You're safe here," Carlyle said to Stephen. Stephen didn't relax. He didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room like someone waiting for the next hit. "Where am I?" Stephen asked. "And what are you?" Carlyle paused. He could lie. He could hide behind gentle words. But something told him lying would be a mistake. "You're in Washington," Carlyle said, "near a town called Forks." Stephen's mouth tightened. "Still Forks." Edward's eyes narrowed. That sounded like the man had expected something else, or feared it. Carlyle continued, steady. As for what we are not human. Stephen's gaze sharpened. Vampires, he said, like it was a diagnosis. The room went very still. Edward stared at Stephen. How do you know that? Stephen looked at Edward like the question was obvious. Your temperature, your eyes, the way you move, the way you smell. He paused. And the way you looked at my throat the second I landed. Edward's face didn't change, but Carlyle felt the tension spike. Carlyle lifted a hand slightly, asking for calm. Stephen looked at Carlyle again. You're in control, he said. Not a question. A statement. Carlyle nodded once. Yes. Stephen glanced around. His eyes stopped on a bookshelf. A lot of old books, medical texts, histories, a few novels. Stephen stepped toward them. He pulled one out, flipped it open, then closed it with a dissatisfied sound. You have a library? He asked. Alice blinked. We have books. Stephen's voice stayed polite, but his eyes were tired. Not this. I need a proper collection, ancient texts, records, anything about unusual events, unnatural events. Carlyle's mind moved quickly. This man had come from somewhere else, that much was clear. Why? Carlyle asked softly. Stephen's jaw tightened. Because something pulled me here, he said, and I can feel the pull still. The cloak fluttered, like it agreed. Carlyle looked at Edward and Alice. Tell me what happened. Edward spoke first. He fell out of the air, he said, and his shield stopped me. Carlyle's gaze returned to Stephen. A shield? Stephen didn't answer right away. He studied Carlyle again. Carlyle saw it now. Stephen wasn't just deciding whether to trust them. He was deciding whether they could survive the truth. Stephen exhaled slowly. I use methods, he said, careful, to protect my world from threats that don't follow normal rules. Edward's eyes narrowed. Magic. Stephen's eyes flicked to Edward. Call it what you want. Carlyle leaned forward just a little. Are you here by choice? Stephen's mouth pulled tight. No. A simple answer. Heavy. Carlyle nodded. Then we will help you, he said. Edward shot him a look. Carlyle held it. Carlyle understood Edward's fear. If Stephen was as powerful as he looked, bringing him into their lives could burn everything down. But Carlyle also saw the other side. A man dropped into a world that wasn't his, surrounded by predators in the rain. Carlyle would not turn his back. Alice spoke quietly. My visions are wrong around him. Stephen's head turned toward her fast. You see the future? Alice hesitated, then nodded. Stephen's eyes narrowed with interest, not fear. That shouldn't happen, he murmured. Not like that. Edward leaned forward. What do you mean, shouldn't? Stephen looked at him. If the future is changing so fast, your gift breaks, he said. Then something is disturbing reality in a deep way. Carlyle felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Carlyle kept his tone calm. You said you felt a crack. Stephen looked at the window. Rain streaked down the glass in steady lines. Yes, Stephen said. Like a rip someone keeps pulling wider. Edward's voice sharpened. From your world or ours? Stephen's eyes stayed on the rain. I don't know yet, he said, but I intend to find out. Carlyle nodded. We can talk privately, he offered. Somewhere quiet. Stephen's gaze slid to the corners of the room, as if he could feel other presences. Jasper hiding still. Emmett upstairs, curious. Rosalie watching with sharp eyes. Stephen's voice stayed flat. I'm already in your home, he said. Quiet would be nice. but I'll take honest." Carlyle gave a small smile. "Fair." He gestured to the couch. "Please, sit." Stephen didn't sit right away. He walked to the fireplace mantel and set his wet hands near it. Not to warm up, but like he was grounding himself. Then he turned. "One condition," Stephen said. Edward's eyes narrowed. "Here it comes." Stephen looked at Carlyle, not Edward. "I will not be treated like a prisoner," he said, "and I will not be used." Carlyle nodded. "Agreed." Edward's jaw tightened. "We don't know what you are." Stephen's eyes flicked to Edward. "Sharp." "Neither do I," he said. "Not in your terms." The room went silent again. Then Bella Swan walked in through the front door, like she had taken a wrong turn into a nightmare. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her hair was damp. She froze as soon as she saw Stephen. Her eyes bounced from Carlyle to Edward to Alice, and then to the cloak hovering behind Stephen like a living scarf. "What is happening?" Bella asked. Edward stepped forward fast. "Bella." "You shouldn't." Bella cut him off, eyes locked on Stephen. "Who are you?" Stephen watched her like she was the first normal thing he had seen. His voice softened a fraction. "Stephen," he said. "I'm lost." Bella didn't flinch. For a human, that was impressive. Carlyle realized something then. This was not only a power problem, it was a secrecy problem. And Bella was the kind of person who pulled on secrets until they snapped. Aro did not need to see the forest to know something had changed. The report came from a whisper network first. A hunter, a runner, a vampire who liked gossip more than sense, a bright ring in the woods, a human falling from nowhere, a light shield that stopped a vampire like a wall. Aro sat back in his ornate chair and smiled. "New," he murmured. "Caius would hate it." Marcus would stare into space and say nothing. But Aro loved new things. He tapped his fingers together. "Find out who he is," he told his guards. "Do not rush. Do not threaten. Invite." An invitation was a leash made of silk. Aro's eyes gleamed. If he came from another world, he whispered, then he may carry doors with him. Stephen stood in the Cullen living room and felt the weight of a small world pressing against him. So many rules, so many secrets. He had stepped into places like this before, not vampire homes, but hidden corners of reality where people survived by staying unseen. He respected it. He also hated it, because secrets were fragile, and fragile things broke when pressure rose. Carlyle spoke again, calm. "Tell us what you remember." Stephen chose his words carefully. He did not say, "sorcerer." Not yet. "I was working," he said, "trying to stop a problem from spreading." Edward's voice was sharp. "What problem?" Stephen met his gaze. "A break between places," he said. "A door that should not open." Alice's face tightened like she was already seeing the worst version. Bella sat stiffly on the couch, eyes wide, watching like she didn't want to blink in case the cloak moved again. Carlyle nodded. "And it opened anyway." Stephen's jaw tightened. "Yes." He didn't mention the names he carried. He didn't mention the things he had fought. He didn't mention the kinds of beings that listened when magic moved. Not until he knew the limits of this world. "Do you have a place of study?" Stephen asked again because he needed it. "A lab, a collection, anything beyond high school textbooks." Bella blinked. "We have a library." Stephen looked at her. "A real one?" he asked, hopeful for half a second. Bella hesitated. "It's a small-town library." Stephen stared at the ceiling for a moment, like he was asking for patience from the universe. The cloak patted his shoulder like it was trying to calm him down. Edward's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. Carlyle cleared his throat gently. We can bring you books, he said. Histories, old records, local stories. Stephen nodded. Start there, he said. And I need to walk the area. Tonight. Edward stiffened. Absolutely not. Stephen's eyes flicked to him. You don't get to decide that, Stephen said, voice low. Edward stepped forward. People disappear in these woods. Stephen didn't move. I noticed, he said. Carlyle stepped between them, calm but firm. Edward, he said. Edward stopped, but his eyes stayed locked on Stephen. Carlyle turned to Stephen. We have neighbors who do not trust us, Carlyle said carefully. If you go out, you may meet them. Stephen's attention sharpened. The wolves? He said. Carlyle nodded once. Stephen's face didn't show fear. It showed calculation. Then I need to meet them, he said. Because if they are part of the balance here, I need to understand the balance. Carlyle watched him. Stephen was direct, almost blunt, but not cruel. He was a protector who did not like being trapped. Carlyle respected that. All right, Carlyle said, but not alone. Stephen looked at him like he was measuring the risk and deciding if it was worth arguing. Finally, fine, Stephen said. But no tricks. Edward's eyes narrowed. Same to you. Stephen looked at Edward with a tired kind of amusement. Trust me, he said. If I wanted to trick you, you'd never notice. Edward's face went stone still. Bella's mouth opened slightly. Okay, she whispered. That was intense. Stephen glanced at her, and for a second his expression softened again. You should not be in the middle of this, he said simply. Bella's chin lifted. That's not how this works, she said. Stephen blinked, almost surprised. Carlyle felt the shape of it, the future of this situation. Stephen would not be able to ignore the human heart in the room, and that would matter. Because the crack Stephen felt was still there, and it was growing. The first sign that Stephen was right came before midnight. It started as a pressure in his ears. Not pain, just a sense of space bending wrong. He stood outside on the Cullen porch with the rain falling hard. And he held a piece of chalk between two fingers like it was a scalpel. The cloak hovered close, trying to shield the chalk from the water, failing. Stephen drew a circle on the wood anyway. The rain smeared it. He drew it again. The rain smeared it again. Stephen's jaw clenched. Unbelievable, he muttered. Alice stood behind him, arms folded. She was trying to look relaxed. She wasn't fooling anyone. You hate the rain, Alice said. Stephen didn't look at her. I hate poor conditions, he corrected. The cloak fluttered as if offended on behalf of the weather. Stephen closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. The world answered like a low hum. Normal life, normal earth, normal air. And then, a thin line, like a fault in glass. It ran through the forest in a direction that made Stephen's stomach tighten. He opened his eyes. Edward was there now, silent as always. You feel it, Edward said. Stephen nodded once. Yes, Edward's voice was quiet. What is it? Stephen's mouth tightened. A tear, he said. Not natural. Not here. Edward's eyes narrowed. Your fault. Stephen's gaze snapped to him. Maybe, he said. Or maybe you had it already, and I just landed close enough to hear it. Edward didn't answer, because that was possible. Forks had always been strange. That was why secrets lived here so easily. Stephen stepped off the porch. Carlyle appeared beside him like a calm ghost. Where is it? Carlyle asked. Stephen pointed into the forest. That way, he said. Carlyle nodded. We will go carefully. Stephen started walking. He did not bother asking permission, because the pressure in the air was rising, and Stephen knew what came next when cracks went untreated. They didn't stay small. They opened. Edward moved ahead through the trees. Alice stayed close. Carlyle followed, calm as a stone in a river. Jasper stayed farther back, watching angles. Stephen walked like a man in a storm with a deadline. He stopped every few minutes, eyes scanning, fingers flexing like he wanted to draw more circles, but knew the rain would mock him. Then the forest went quiet in a way Edward did not like. Even the normal sounds, the tiny ones, faded. Stephen slowed. "Here," he said. Edward saw it then. Not a shape, not a creature, a wrongness. The air shimmered between two trees, like heat above asphalt, but colder, darker. A tear no human eye should recognize, and yet Edward could see it like a stain. Alice's breath caught. "That's not from us!" Stephen's hands rose, simple, controlled. A golden ring formed around his fingers, then expanded into a pattern of glowing shapes. Edward felt the heat of it. Not physical heat, a presence. Stephen spoke under his breath in a language Edward did not know. The tear reacted. It pulsed. Then it split wider like a mouth opening. Something slid out. It wasn't a vampire, not a wolf, not an animal. It looked like shadow folded into a body. Long arms, sharp angles. A face that wasn't a face. It moved toward Edward. Edward launched forward. He hit it, and his hands passed through like he had punched smoke. The thing snapped back anyway, as if impact mattered even if it wasn't solid. Edward landed and turned, ready to strike again. Stephen's voice cut through the rain. "Don't touch it." Edward glared. "It went for me. And it will go for your people next," Stephen said sharp. "If you feed it what it wants." Carlyle's gaze stayed on the shadow creature. "What does it want?" Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Life," he said. "And something else." The creature jerked its head toward Alice. Alice stepped back fast. It followed. Stephen moved between them. A circular shield snapped into place, and the creature slammed into it, screeching like metal dragged across stone. Edward flinched at the sound. It wasn't loud. It was wrong. Stephen's fingers turned, and glowing bands shot out like ropes. They wrapped the creature's limbs and yanked it down. The creature thrashed, but the bands held. Edward stared. He had seen strong vampires. He had seen wolves tear through enemies. But this wasn't strength. This was control over the rules. More shadows poured from the tear. 2, 3, 4. They spread into the forest like a pack. Alice's eyes went wide. "I can't see," she started. Then she stopped, tense. "I can see pieces, and then nothing." Stephen's jaw set. "They're blocking you," he said. Edward snapped his head toward him. "They?" Stephen didn't answer right away. He lifted both hands. A larger pattern formed in the air. A circle inside a circle. Symbols that spun like gears. The tear trembled as if something on the other side was pulling it open. Stephen's voice dropped. "This is not random." A shadow creature darted toward Carlyle. Carlyle moved, fast and smooth, grabbing it and throwing it away from Stephen. Carlyle's strength was clean, controlled, like a doctor moving a patient without harm. The creature twisted midair and lunged again. Jasper's eyes narrowed, his gift pushed outward, quiet and steady. The panic in the air softened, not gone, but less sharp. It helped. Edward realized they were already becoming a team, even without agreeing to it. Stephen's eyes stayed on the tear. He made a sharp motion like closing a book. A bright line snapped across the tear's center, and the opening shuddered. For one breath, it looked like it would seal. Then the tear bulged, as if something large pressed from the other side. Stephen's face tightened. "Of course," he muttered. The cloak yanked at his collar like it was warning him. Stephen made a new decision fast. Edward could see it in the way Stephen's shoulders set. Stephen flicked his fingers toward the ground. A glowing circle spread outward under all of them. The world shifted. Not like teleporting. Like the forest was still there, but the rules were different. The trees looked sharper. The rain froze in midair for a split second, then fell in slow motion. Edward felt it like stepping into a room with strange gravity. Alice gasped. "What did you do?" Stephen's voice was tight, focused. "I moved us somewhere safe." Edward's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Stephen glanced at him. "A copy," he said. "A place that mirrors your world." Edward looked around and felt a chill that had nothing to do with cold. It was Forks. But not Forks. No human life at all. No hidden heartbeats. No chance that someone would see this. Stephen's eyes stayed on the tear. It had come with them, like a wound, brought into a clean room. "This is temporary," Stephen said, "but it gives me space." The shadow creatures moved again, faster now. Stephen didn't panic. He stepped forward and fought like someone who had done this too many times. A shield to block, a portal to redirect, a binding spell to pin two creatures at once. When one creature tried to slip behind him, the cloak slapped it aside like a furious flag. Edward attacked where he could, striking the shapes the moment they became solid enough to matter. Carlyle moved to protect, not to kill. Jasper kept the fear from turning into chaos. Alice stayed close, eyes darting, calling out warnings when her visions gave her even half a second of clarity. Then the tear bulged again. A symbol flashed inside it. Red. Not blood red. Not vampire red. A sharp, bright crimson, like a stamp pressed into reality. Stephen froze for half a breath. Edward saw it. The change in Stephen's face. Recognition. Stephen's voice went low. "That isn't mine," Edward snarled. "Then whose is it?" Stephen didn't answer. He raised both hands and spoke faster now, the words cracking through the air like commands. The tear fought him. It pulled backward, like a rope being yanked by something strong. Stephen's eyes narrowed. He pushed harder. The symbol flashed again, and the tear shuddered. Then, with a harsh snap, it collapsed inward. The shadow creatures screamed as they were pulled back, dragged like garbage into a drain. Silence slammed down. The mirrored forest stood still. Rain resumed its normal fall. Edward stood with his hands half raised, ready for the next attack. None came. Alice stared at the space where the tear had been, breathing fast. "It's closed." Stephen lowered his hand slowly, like his arms were heavier now. "Closed enough," he said. Edward stepped closer. "But it tried to open again." Stephen nodded. "Yes." Carlyle's voice was calm, but serious. "What was that symbol?" Stephen's jaw tightened. "A seal," he said. Edward's eyes narrowed. "A seal from where?" Stephen looked toward the direction of town, even though they were not in the real town right now. "It's connected to a power center," Stephen said, voice flat. Carlyle's face remained calm, but Edward felt the weight in his next words before he spoke them. Carlyle said, "Volterra." Stephen's eyes flicked back to him. "Volterra," he repeated. He tasted the word like he was already planning around it. Edward felt a cold dread settle in his chest. If the Volturi were involved, this wasn't just a new threat. It was a war that could drag humans into the open. Stephen looked at them all, vampires who tried to be good, a gift seer whose future was breaking, and an invisible pack line waiting in the real forest. Then he spoke in a voice that sounded like a promise and a warning at the same time. "Someone is opening doors they don't understand," he said, "and I'm going to shut them." Forks did what Forks always did. It rained like the sky had decided the town needed to stay quiet. But the quiet was gone. By morning, The forest felt watched, not by eyes, by pressure, like the air remembered the crack that had opened and was waiting for it to happen again. Stephen stood at the edge of the Cullen driveway with his hands in his pockets, staring at the trees. His hair was still damp from last night. The cloak hovered close, puffed up around his shoulders like it was trying to make him look bigger. Edward stayed on the porch, arms crossed. Alice stood near the door, face tight, as if she had slept with her eyes open. Carlyle stepped outside last, calm as ever. "We need to talk," he said. Stephen nodded once. "Yes." They went inside. Bella was already there. She sat on the couch like she was guarding it. Stephen did not sit. He stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Carlyle kept his voice gentle. "What happened last night was beyond anything we've dealt with here." Stephen's eyes stayed on the forest. "Your world has rules," he said, "but those rules were bent." Edward's jaw tightened. "By you." Stephen turned his head slowly. "Or because of you," he said. "Either way, it's here now." Bella leaned forward. "You pulled us into that other place," she said. "That copy." Stephen glanced at her. "A mirror space," he said. "It keeps humans from seeing what they shouldn't." Edward's eyes narrowed. "So, you can hide everything." Stephen's mouth flattened. "I can hide a battle," he corrected. "I can't hide consequences." Carlyle nodded. "That's what worries me." Alice rubbed her arms, even though she didn't need warmth. "My visions are still fuzzy," she said. "I can see you standing in a long hallway. Stone, torches. Then it breaks, like someone tore it." Stephen's eyes sharpened at the word hallway. "Volterra," he said quietly. Edward's face hardened. "We don't say that name lightly." Stephen looked at him. "Your fear is reasonable," he said. "But fear doesn't solve a crack in reality." Bella looked between them. "So, what do we do?" Stephen took a slow breath. "First," he said, "I need information." Edward let out a short, humorless sound. "Of course." Stephen shot him a look. "Not gossip," he said. "Facts, history, places where your world has thinned." Carlyle stepped toward a small side table and picked up a local map. He spread it out. "We know where the treaty line is," Carlyle said. "We know where fights have happened. We know the places that feel wrong." Stephen leaned in. For a second, he looked like a surgeon studying a scan. He pointed. "Here," he said. "And here." Alice blinked. "How do you—" Stephen tapped the map again. "Because the air changes," he said. "Because the crack pulls at certain angles." Edward stared. "You're acting like it's a wound." "It is," Stephen said. "To reality." Carlyle's voice stayed calm. "What caused it?" Stephen's eyes flicked to the window. Rain. Trees. A quiet town that didn't know it had a door to something else. "I was trying to seal a problem in my world," he said. "Something pushed back. When I fell here, I felt a second pull. That means either the door attached to something already weak, or someone on this side is making it weak on purpose." Silence settled. Bella swallowed. "Someone here is doing this." Stephen looked at her. "It's possible," he said. "And last night I saw a crimson seal. That seal had intent." Edward's eyes narrowed. "Crimson." Stephen didn't explain further. Not yet. He was keeping names locked behind his teeth. Carlyle folded his hands. "If the Volturi are involved, they will come," Edward cut in. Alice nodded, face pale. "They already know." Stephen glanced between them. "Why do they matter so much?" he asked. Edward's voice went colder. "Because they control what vampires can be. They decide who lives. Who dies." Stephen absorbed that. A hidden government. A silent law. Carlyle added, and they protect secrecy, in their way. Stephen's expression tightened. Secrecy, he repeated, like it was both a shield and a poison. Bella's eyes flashed. Secrecy is why people get hurt, she said. Edward turned to her. Secrecy is why people stay alive. Bella didn't back down. Or stay lied to. Stephen watched the exchange with a tired understanding. He had seen this fight in different costumes. Carlyle stepped in softly. Bella, he said, this is complicated. Bella shook her head. It always is, she said. That's how people excuse it. Stephen finally sat. Not because he was tired, because he wanted to look Bella in the eye. You're right, he said simply. Complicated is not an excuse. Edward stiffened. Don't encourage her. Stephen's gaze flicked to Edward. She doesn't need encouragement, he said. She needs answers. Carlyle looked at Stephen. And what do you need? Stephen leaned forward, elbows on knees. Time, he said. A stable space. A base. A place to work without the rain erasing my tools. The cloak fluttered like it was personally offended by the rain again. Alice raised a hand like she was in class. We have a garage. Stephen stared at her. Alice smiled weakly. It's dry. Stephen blinked once, then looked away, as if forcing patience into his lungs. Fine, he said. A garage. Edward's mouth twitched, the smallest sign of amusement. Stephen noticed it. Don't, he warned. Edward's eyes sparkled for half a second. You're the one who said forks, like it was a disease. Bella covered her mouth, hiding a smile. Stephen exhaled through his nose. I'm coping, he said. Carlyle's gaze lifted toward the front window, his expression sharpened. Edward turned, too. A car had pulled up, not a normal town car. Dark, clean, quiet. A stranger stepped out and walked to the door like he owned the ground. Edward's posture snapped into readiness. Alice's face went tight. That's fast, she whispered. Carlyle opened the door before the knock. The stranger smiled politely. He looked young, but his eyes were old. Dr. Cullen, he said, voice smooth. I bring greetings. Edward's voice was sharp. From who? The stranger's smile did not change. From those who keep order, he said. Stephen stood behind Carlyle, gaze steady. He studied the stranger like a file. The stranger's eyes flicked to Stephen. Interest flared. Welcome, the stranger said. We were told you appeared. Unexpectedly. Stephen's expression stayed blank. Who are you? A messenger, the stranger said. You may call me Felix's runner. Edward stiffened at the name. Carlyle kept his voice calm. What does your counsel want? The messenger's smile widened a fraction. A conversation, he said. An invitation. Volterra would like to meet the outsider. Stephen felt the word outsider land like a hook. Bella's eyes widened. They already have a name for him. Edward's gaze snapped to her. Bella didn't care. Stephen took one step forward. And if I refuse? The messenger's smile stayed polite. His eyes did not. Refusal would be unfortunate, he said. Order dislikes uncertainty. Stephen nodded slowly. So it's not an invitation, he said. It's a leash. Edward's lips curled. Now you understand. Carlyle's tone stayed gentle, but there was steel in it. We will consider, he said. The messenger's gaze lingered on Stephen again. They are curious, he said. You moved space last night. That kind of thing does not happen here. Stephen's eyes narrowed. How do you know what happened last night? The messenger's smile sharpened. We have eyes, he said. Always. Edward's hands clenched. Stephen's voice stayed even. Tell them, he said. "I will come when I choose, not when I'm summoned." The messenger blinked, surprised by the directness. Then he dipped his head. "As you wish," he said, "but don't wait too long. Curiosity becomes anger when it is ignored." He turned and walked away like the rain could not touch him. When the car vanished down the road, the house seemed smaller. Bella spoke first. "That was terrifying." Edward's voice was flat. "That was polite." Stephen stared at the door for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to meet the wolves." Edward snapped his head toward him. "No." Stephen looked at him. "Yes," he said. "If I'm going to solve this, I need every piece on the board." Carlyle's eyes softened. "Edward," he said quietly, "we can't control this alone." Edward's jaw tightened. Stephen stood. "I'll go," he said. "With Carlyle." Edward shook his head. "They don't trust us." Stephen's face stayed calm. "They don't need to trust you," he said. "They need to understand me." Bella stood up fast. "I'm coming!" Edward's voice sharpened. "Bella!" Stephen's gaze flicked to Bella. "No," he said. Bella froze. She wasn't used to someone telling her no without fear. Stephen spoke simply. "You're human," he said. "And the wolves are already angry. I'm not risking you for a meeting." Bella's cheeks flushed. "I can handle—" Stephen's tone stayed calm, but it left no room. "This isn't about what you can handle," he said. "It's about what I can protect." Bella stared at him, then looked away, frustrated. Edward watched Stephen, and for the first time his suspicion shifted into something else. Respect, maybe, or annoyance at sharing the same protective instinct. Charlie Swan didn't know about cracks in reality, but he knew when his town felt wrong. The next day at the station, he had 3 calls about strange lights in the woods. A hiker said he saw a flash like lightning with no sound. A teenager claimed the sky blinked. Someone else swore they heard an animal scream that didn't sound like any animal. Charlie rubbed his forehead and stared at the coffee he hadn't finished. Forks wasn't exciting. That was the point. Trouble was supposed to be small here. He leaned back in his chair and looked at Bella's number on his phone. He didn't call right away, because he had called her too much lately, and every time she sounded like she was standing behind a door. Charlie hated that door. He stood and walked to the window. Rain made the street shine. Cars passed slow. People kept their heads down. And then Charlie saw it. A man walking across the parking lot. Not from town. Charlie would have remembered that face. Sharp eyes, dark hair, a long coat that looked too expensive to be soaked this easily. The man's posture was straight, like he was used to walking into danger. Charlie frowned. He stepped outside. "Hey," Charlie called. The man stopped. For a second, Charlie expected fear, or guilt, or at least confusion. Instead, the man looked at Charlie like Charlie was a normal problem in a world full of strange ones. "Officer," the man said. Charlie narrowed his eyes. "Can I help you?" The man's gaze flicked to the station sign, then back. "Maybe," he said. "I'm trying to understand your town." Charlie didn't like that answer. "Name?" The man paused. "Stephen," he said. Charlie waited. No last name. Charlie's suspicion rose. "What are you doing in Forks, Stephen?" Stephen glanced at the clouds like he was already tired of explaining. "I had an accident," he said. "I'm staying with friends." Charlie's eyes narrowed. Friends. Stephen nodded once, like it was obvious. "The Cullens." Charlie felt his stomach drop just a little. "Of course you are." Stephen's eyes sharpened. "You don't like them," he said. Charlie frowned. "I don't dislike them," he said. "I don't understand them." Stephen's gaze shifted, like he was looking past Charlie into the town itself. Then Stephen said something that made Charlie's skin prickle. "Is your daughter safe?" Stephen asked. Charlie's voice went hard. "What did you say?" Stephen met his gaze. "Bella," he said. "Is she safe?" Charlie didn't answer right away, because hearing a stranger say Bella's name felt like a hand reaching into his house. "How do you know Bella?" Charlie demanded. Stephen's expression stayed calm. "She was there," he said. "When I arrived." Charlie's eyes narrowed further. "Arrived from where?" Stephen didn't answer. Charlie's hand drifted toward his belt out of habit. Stephen noticed. Of course he noticed. Stephen held up both hands, not in surrender, but in a clear signal. "I'm not your enemy," Stephen said. "But something is happening in your forest, and it will touch your town if it spreads." Charlie's jaw tightened. "You sound like a man trying to scare me." Stephen's eyes did not blink. "You should be scared," he said simply, "but not of me." Charlie stared at him, trying to decide if this was a crazy drifter or something worse. Stephen's gaze softened just a fraction. "Keep Bella close," he said. "And if you hear about lights in the woods, keep people out." Then Stephen walked away. Charlie watched him go, rain soaking his coat, and felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. Bella was in deeper than she was telling him. Again. The treaty line wasn't marked with paint or signs. It didn't need to be. Sam felt it in his bones. He stood in the forest with his pack behind him, rain sliding off fur, listening to the approaching footsteps. Not human. Not vampire. Something in between, or beyond, or sideways. Then Carlisle Cullen stepped into view first, hands open, calm. Beside him was the outsider. Stephen. Sam's eyes narrowed. He didn't shift. Not yet. He stayed human on purpose. This was a meeting, not a charge. Stephen stopped a few feet back from the invisible line, as if he could sense it. Sam respected that. A little. Carlisle spoke first. "Sam," he said softly, "thank you for meeting us." Sam's voice was flat. "You brought him," he said. Carlisle nodded. "We didn't choose for him to arrive, but we have to respond." Sam's gaze locked on Stephen. "What are you?" Stephen's eyes stayed steady. "I'm not your enemy," he said. Sam didn't blink. "That's what enemies say." Stephen nodded once, like he accepted that. "Fair," he said. "Then let's talk about what attacked us last night." Sam's jaw tightened. "We felt it," he admitted. "The air went wrong." Stephen's eyes sharpened. "Good," he said. "Then you know this isn't a vampire problem. It's bigger." Sam glanced at Carlisle. "And you think he can fix it?" Carlisle spoke calmly. "I think he can help," he said. Sam's gaze returned to Stephen. "Help? How?" Stephen looked at the trees, then back. "Your land has a boundary," he said. "A line you respect. That line has power, because you believe in it and enforce it." Sam frowned. "It's a treaty. It's a rule," Stephen said. "Rules can be anchors." Sam didn't like the way Stephen spoke about it, like Sam's world was a tool. "What do you want?" Sam asked. Stephen's voice stayed direct. "Access," he said. "I need to map weak points, places where reality is thin. Your land may have some of those places, and I need to use boundaries to help seal the crack." Sam's eyes narrowed. "And what do we get?" Stephen didn't hesitate. "Your people stay alive," he said. "Humans stay safe, and you get warning before the next tear opens." Sam's face stayed hard, but the offer hit the pack bond like a stone. Jacob, standing behind Sam, shifted his weight. He spoke without asking permission. "And if you're lying," Jacob said, staring at Stephen, "we tear you apart." Carlisle tensed. Stephen looked at Jacob like he was looking at a younger version of someone he'd argued with 100 times. Stephen's voice stayed calm. "If I was lying," he said, "you wouldn't get close enough to try." Jacob's eyes widened. Not fear. Surprise. Anger. Sam snapped his head toward Jacob through the bond, warning him to stay still. Stephen turned back to Sam. "Look," he said. "The Volturi already noticed me. They invited me. That means they're moving." Sam's eyes narrowed. "They invited you?" Stephen nodded. "Yes." Sam's face tightened. "That's bad." Stephen's gaze didn't flinch. "It's predictable," he said. "Power attracts control." Sam stared at him for a long moment. Then Sam said, "You don't cross the line without us knowing. You don't involve humans." Stephen nodded once. "Agreed," he said. "And you don't attack me while I'm trying to stop the thing that will eat your world." Sam's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost." "Deal," Sam said. Jacob glared. Stephen looked at Jacob again. "You're the loud one," he said. Jacob bristled. "I'm the honest one." Stephen nodded. "Good," he said. "Honesty will keep you alive." Jacob didn't know whether to be insulted or impressed. Carlyle exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath the whole time. Stephen turned to leave. Then he paused and looked at the rain dripping from the trees. "You have any indoor space out here?" Stephen asked Sam. "That isn't a high school gym." Jacob blinked. "What?" Stephen's face stayed serious. "A place to work," he said. "Dry. Quiet." Sam stared at him like he'd asked for a spaceship. "We have a shed," Jacob said. Stephen's eyes closed for 1 second. Then he opened them again. "Fine," he said. "A shed." The cloak drooped like it was mourning. Jacob snorted. Sam watched the cloak like he was watching a strange animal. "You brought a haunted blanket," Jacob muttered. Stephen's head turned. "It's not haunted," he said. The cloak gave Jacob a sharp, offended snap. Jacob stepped back. "Okay," he said quickly. "Haunted." "Got it." For half a second, the tension eased. It didn't last, because far away, in a place of stone and ancient control, someone was smiling at the thought of Stephen stepping into their halls. Aro read the reports like they were love letters. He did not rush. He savored. A human who moved space. A glowing shield that stopped a vampire. A mirror world where battles could happen unseen. A mind that even Edward Cullen struggled to read. Aro's eyes shone with soft delight. "Finally," he whispered. Caius paced behind him, angry energy in every step. "We should destroy him," Caius snapped, "before he breaks our world." Aro did not look up. "Destroy," he repeated, as if the word was dull. "And lose what he knows? Lose what he is." Marcus sat like a statue, staring at nothing. Aro tapped the paper. "If he can hide battles from humans," he said, "he can also hide mistakes." Caius snarled. "And?" Aro's smile widened. "And that makes him useful," he said. He lifted his gaze, dreamy and sharp at once. "Imagine it," Aro murmured. "Order with no witnesses. Control with no panic. A world where humans never learn the truth, because the truth is edited away." Caius looked disgusted. "You want to chain him?" Aro's eyes glittered. "I want to offer him a reason to chain himself," he said. He leaned forward. "A man like that is not tempted by gold. He's tempted by responsibility, by duty, by the feeling that if he just takes control, fewer people will die." Aro's voice softened, as if he was speaking about art. "We will not threaten him," he said. "Not first." He clapped his hands once. "Send another invitation," Aro ordered, "and tell Jane to prepare." Caius hissed, "You'll bring him into our home." Aro smiled like a child with a new toy. "Yes," he said, "because if he is a door, we must be the hand that holds the key." Stephen worked out of the Cullen garage for 2 days. It was not a sanctum. It was not a library. It smelled like oil and old tools, but it was dry. Stephen drew circles on the concrete floor. He carved lines of light in the air, then anchored them in place. The cloak hovered above him like a protective lamp. Edward watched from the doorway most of the time, silent. On the second night, Bella came in with a stack of books from the town library. They looked tiny in her arms. She set them down with a proud little lift of her chin. "This is what we have," she said. Stephen stared at the books. Then he nodded. "Thank you," he said. And he meant it. Bella blinked. She wasn't used to gratitude from someone who looked like he had 1,000 problems. Stephen opened one book and flipped through it. Local history, old newspaper pages, strange animal attacks, disappearances, patterns. His eyes narrowed. "Edward," Stephen said without looking up. Edward's gaze sharpened. "What?" "Volterra," Stephen said. "Tell me everything you can without making your voice shake." Edward's jaw tightened. "They enforce secrecy," he said. "They punish. They collect gifts. They watch." Stephen nodded slowly. Then he spoke, quiet. "They're also connected to the tear." Edward's eyes narrowed. "How do you know?" Stephen pointed to the floor. A small glow rose from a circle he'd drawn. It was like a map made of light. Thin lines stretched through forks and beyond, like veins. One line pulled harder than the others. It pointed east, across oceans, toward an ancient weight. Stephen's voice went flat. "Because the crack leans toward them," he said. Carlyle appeared behind Edward. He stared at the glowing map, calm face turning serious. "We can't fight them," Carlyle said softly. Stephen looked up. "I'm not planning to fight them," he said. Edward scoffed. "Then what are you planning?" Stephen stood. "I'm planning to walk into their home," he said, "and make it clear that if they're opening doors, they're going to stop." Edward stared. "You think you can walk into Volterra and threaten them?" Stephen's eyes were tired. "I think I can walk into Volterra and tell the truth," he said. "Threats are for people with less control." Edward's expression tightened. "That sounds like a threat." Stephen's mouth twitched once. "Maybe it is," he admitted. Bella watched him. "Will you come back?" she asked quietly. Stephen looked at her, and for a second his face softened again. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." Carlyle nodded. "Then we should prepare," he said. Stephen turned back to the circles. "Yes," he said, "and I'm leaving something behind." Edward leaned in. "What?" Stephen's gaze sharpened. "A warning system," he said. "Wards. If the tear opens again, I want to feel it instantly." Edward's eyes narrowed. "You can do that." Stephen didn't smile. "I should have done it already," he said. His hands moved, fast and sure. Golden lines rose from the floor and sank into the walls, like invisible wires. The garage felt different afterward, heavier, safer. Bella rubbed her arms. "It feels like the room is holding its breath," she said. Stephen nodded. "Good," he said. "That means it's listening." Edward stared at him, and something in Edward's suspicion shifted again. Stephen wasn't here to conquer. He was here to guard. And that could still be dangerous, because guardians made enemies. The side road to La Push was slick with rain. Stephen rode in Carlyle's car, staring out the window, watching trees blur past. Carlyle drove smoothly, calm hands on the wheel. Edward followed in another car, because of course he did. Stephen didn't argue. Edward's distrust was loud, but it was also useful. A watchful ally was still a watchful ally. When they reached the edge of La Push, Stephen stepped out and immediately looked at the sky like it had personally betrayed him. The rain came down harder here, pushed by wind. The cloak tugged at Stephen's collar and tried to fold around his head like a hood. "I know," Stephen muttered. I know. They met Sam and two others near a small building that smelled like salt and wood. Jacob was there too, arms crossed, eyes on Stephen. Stephen looked around. "This is your shed," he said. Jacob bristled. "It's not a shed." Stephen's gaze slid to the building again. "It's a shed," he said. Jacob opened his mouth. Sam cut in. "It's ours," Sam said. "What do you need?" Stephen stepped inside and immediately saw the problem. The floor was damp. The air was damp. Even the walls felt damp. Stephen stared at the space as if it had insulted his entire career. Then he nodded once, accepting reality. "Fine," he said. He pulled chalk from his pocket. Jacob blinked. "You carry chalk?" Stephen didn't look up. "I carry what I need," he said. He drew a circle on the floor. The rainwater that had leaked in smeared the line. Stephen stared at it. Then he drew it again. It smeared again. Stephen inhaled slowly, like he was forcing himself not to yell at weather. The cloak fluttered, and then pressed itself down over the circle like a living cover. Stephen glanced at it. "Thank you," he said. Jacob watched the cloak with open suspicion. "It listens to you," Jacob said. "It has taste," Stephen replied, still drawing. Jacob frowned. "Taste." The cloak snapped at Jacob again. Jacob lifted both hands. "Okay. Taste." "Sorry." Sam watched Stephen's hands. "You're building something," Sam said. Stephen nodded. "A temporary anchor," he said. "A stabilizer." Sam frowned. "For the crack." "For the crack," Stephen agreed. "Your treaty line matters because it's enforced. It has weight." Jacob leaned forward. "How does a line have weight?" Stephen looked up. "Because you all agree it matters," he said. "You believe it, and you act on it. Reality respects repeated rules." Sam's eyes narrowed. "That's not how it works." Stephen's voice stayed calm. "It's how it works more than you think," he said. He finished the circle and placed his hand over it. Light rose in a thin sheet. It settled like a quiet net. Stephen closed his eyes. He reached out. The world answered with a low, tense hum. He felt the treaty line like a cord pulled tight. He felt vampire territory like cold stones. He felt humans like soft, warm sparks. And then he felt it. A thin, hungry pull, far away, tugging at all of it. Stephen's eyes opened. "It's still there," he said. Edward stepped inside, silent. "And," Edward said. Stephen's gaze was sharp. "And it's learning," he said. Alice stepped into the doorway behind Edward, eyes wide. "Something is wrong," she said. Edward's head snapped toward her. "What?" Alice swallowed. "I saw a fight," she said. "In the forest. Wolves. Vampires. But the vampire moved. Wrong. Like she was being pulled." Edward's face tightened. "Victoria." Carlyle's calm cracked just a little. "She's back?" Edward's jaw clenched. "If Alice saw her, then yes." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Who is Victoria?" Edward's voice was tight. "A vampire who doesn't stop," he said. "She wants Bella dead." Bella wasn't here, but her name hit the air like a spark. Jacob's shoulders tensed. Sam's eyes sharpened. Stephen stood slowly. His voice was low and controlled. "Then she is a lever," he said. "And someone is pulling it." Sam frowned. "Meaning?" Stephen looked at them all. "The crack is feeding," he said. "It needs conflict. It needs fear. It needs movement." Edward's voice went hard. "So it's using her." Stephen nodded once. "Or someone is using her," he said. Alice's eyes filled with panic she couldn't hide. "I can't see the end," she whispered. "It goes blank." Stephen stepped toward her and spoke quietly. "Stay with the facts," he said. "What did you see first?" Alice swallowed. "A scream," she said. not human. Then, the trees bending, like something invisible moved through them. Stephen's jaw tightened. "We go now," he said. Edward's voice snapped. "Bella!" Stephen's eyes flashed. "I already put wards around the house," he said. "If anything crosses them, I'll know." Edward froze. "You didn't tell me." Stephen's face stayed flat. "You would have argued," he said. Edward's mouth opened, then shut. Carlyle spoke softly. "We go," he agreed. Sam's pack stiffened. "We go too," Sam said. Edward's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your fight." Sam's voice went cold. "It's our land," he said. "Everything is our fight." Stephen stepped out into the rain. The cloak snapped behind him like a banner. "Keep up," Stephen said. It wasn't a command meant to insult. It was a fact. The forest swallowed them fast. Edward moved ahead, a blur through trees. Sam and his wolves shifted behind the cover of thick trunks. Bones moved. Fur rose. They became heat and muscle in seconds. Stephen watched it with a brief, clinical interest. Then he turned his attention forward, and the air changed. He felt it first as pressure against his ribs. The crack was close. Not open. Yet. But close. A scream tore through the trees. Not human. A wolf scream, pained and furious. Sam's head snapped up. He launched forward. Stephen followed, running but not in panic. He saved panic for when it helped. They broke into a clearing. The scene hit like a punch. One wolf was down, legs scrambled under him, trying to rise. Two others circled a pale figure moving too fast to track. Victoria. Her hair was bright against the gray rain. Her eyes were wild. But her movement was off. Not just fast. Jagged. Like her body was following a rhythm she didn't choose. Edward appeared and slammed into her from the side. Victoria skidded back, snarling. Then she laughed. It wasn't normal laughter. It sounded like someone else laughing through her mouth. Stephen's eyes narrowed. He lifted his hand. A golden whip of energy snapped out, wrapped around Victoria's wrist, and yanked. Victoria jerked like she'd been pulled by a hook. Her head snapped toward Stephen. For one breath, her eyes weren't just vampire eyes. They were darker, deeper, hungry. "Hello," a voice said. Not Victoria's voice, something behind it. Stephen's stomach tightened. He didn't show it. "Show yourself," Stephen said. Victoria's smile stretched too wide. "Not yet," the voice said. "But you feel me." Stephen's fingers tightened. He pulled harder. A thin black thread flickered behind Victoria's back, like a shadow string tied into her spine. Stephen's eyes sharpened. "There," he said. Edward lunged, trying to rip Victoria apart fast enough to stop her. Stephen snapped his other hand up. A portal opened under Edward's feet and dropped him 3 steps to the left, just enough to keep Edward from falling into a trap Stephen felt in the air. Edward landed, furious. "What are you doing?" "Saving you," Stephen snapped. The forest shuddered. Trees bent as if something invisible passed between them. Then the crack opened. Not fully, but enough. A dark slit in the air, like a wound forced apart. Shadow shapes spilled out faster than last time. The wolves charged. Their teeth found nothing at first, smoke and wrongness. But when a shadow creature hit one wolf's shoulder, the creature went solid for a split second. That was all the pack needed. Teeth. Force. A ripping motion. The creature screamed and snapped apart like burned paper. Stephen didn't waste time. He raised both hands and formed a shield dome around the clearing. Rain hit it and slid off like water on glass. Inside the dome, sound became clearer, sharper. Outside, the forest became muted. Edward's eyes widened. "What is that?" "A boundary," Stephen said. "So we stop it from spreading." Victoria laughed again, the wrong voice still behind her. "You're so careful," it taunted. Stephen's gaze locked on her. "You're so dependent," he said. He flicked his wrist. Bands of light snapped around Victoria's arms and legs, pinning her in place. Victoria snarled and fought, but the bands held. Then the shadow thread behind her pulsed, and Victoria jerked again, almost like a puppet. Stephen stepped closer, eyes narrowed, reading the thread. Edward moved to strike again. Stephen's voice cut like a blade. "Don't!" Edward froze, trembling with rage. "She'll kill Bella." Stephen didn't look away from Victoria. "Not if I understand this first," he said. "Not if I cut the string." Sam's wolf form paced at the edge of the shield, growling. The shadow creature slammed into the dome. Stephen's shield held, but each hit made it ripple. He could do this. He could hold it. But the crack in the air was pulling harder now, like it wanted the dome to become its new mouth. Stephen made a decision. He drew a circle in the air with both hands. The circle expanded. Symbols flared around the edge. Edward felt it like a storm gathering. Then the world shifted. The clearing duplicated into the mirror dimension again. Trees became sharp outlines. Rain slowed. The sky turned into a hard gray ceiling. The wolves stumbled, then regained footing fast. Edward's eyes widened as the world snapped into the copy. Stephen's voice was tight. "This keeps humans blind," he said. "And it gives me room." Victoria's head tilted, eyes glittering. "You think you can hide from me in a mirror?" Stephen stepped closer to her. "I'm not hiding," he said. "I'm operating." He raised a hand and pressed 2 fingers near Victoria's temple, not touching skin, touching the thread. Victoria screamed, not from pain, but from resistance, like the string itself hated being seen. The crimson seal flashed inside the crack again. Stephen's eyes narrowed. He recognized the style of it now, not from his own spells, from something that mimicked structure, order, control. A voice far away slid through the crack like oil. "Doctor," it purred. Stephen's blood went cold. He didn't show it. He spoke to the voice. "You're not supposed to be able to say that name here," he said. The voice laughed softly. "You brought it with you," it said. And someone here opened the door wider. Stephen's jaw tightened. "Who?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the crack swelled and spat out something larger than the shadow creatures. A hulking shape, like a knight made of darkness, with long arms and a head that looked like a mask. It hit the ground and made the mirror world tremble. Edward stared. "That's new." Stephen's voice was sharp. "That's a sentry," he said. "A guard." The Shadow Knight charged Stephen. Stephen didn't dodge backward. He opened a portal beside himself and stepped through it, reappearing behind the knight. He slammed a glowing symbol into the knight's back. The symbol stuck like a seal. The knight froze for a half-second. Then it kept moving, fighting through the binding like a machine pushing through mud. Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Stubborn." Edward launched onto the knight's shoulder, ripping at it with vampire strength. His hands tore off pieces of shadow that turned solid under pressure. The knight swung an arm, trying to throw Edward. Stephen opened a portal in front of the arm. The arm went through, and the portal's exit opened above the knight's own head. The knight hit itself with its own strike. Edward dropped, landing in a crouch, eyes wide. Sam's wolves hit the knight's legs the moment it stumbled, jaws clamping down when the shadow turned solid. They dragged. They tore. The knight screamed like a door being forced off its hinges. Stephen used the moment. He lifted both hands and pulled. Not on the knight. On the crack. He grabbed the edges of the tier like he was grabbing raw fabric and yanked them together. The tier fought him. It pulled back. Then the crimson seal flared brighter, like someone on the other side was pressing their hand against it. Stephen felt the pressure, felt the intent, a hand that wanted to keep the door open. Stephen clenched his jaw. He pushed. The tier narrowed. The sentry knight shrieked and began to dissolve, like it was losing its tether. Edward ripped one last chunk away and threw it aside. The wolves backed off, panting, eyes bright. Stephen snapped his hands together. The tier collapsed inward again with a harsh, final crack. Silence dropped. In the mirror dimension, the rain finally stopped, frozen in midair like beads. Victoria slumped in her bindings, eyes still wild, chest heaving, even though she didn't need air. Stephen stared at the spot where the tear had been. Then he spoke, voice low. "This isn't random," he said. Edward stepped forward, breathing hard. "We know." Stephen turned to Victoria. He raised a hand again, careful, and traced the shadow thread that had been tied to her. The thread flickered, then snapped. Victoria's body jerked. Her eyes cleared slightly. Confusion flashed through them, then rage. She lunged against the bindings like an animal. Stephen tightened the bands without looking. He kept his focus on what mattered. He felt it now. The crack wasn't just a hole. It was a decision. A permission. A door that opened because someone invited it. Stephen looked up at Carlyle, then Edward, then Sam's wolves. His voice was steady, but it carried weight. "Someone is opening the door on purpose," he said. "And they're using your war to do it." Edward's face went hard. "The Volturi." Stephen didn't say the name yet. He didn't need to. He lifted his gaze toward the direction of Volterra, even though they were in a mirrored copy of the world. His eyes were tired, but they were also sharp. "Now," Stephen said quietly, "we stop the hand that keeps turning the key." Days passed, then a week, then another. Forks stayed gray. The rain stayed steady, but the air around the Cullen house did not feel helpless anymore. Stephen built routines the way he used to build surgeries in his mind. Step 1. Step 2. Check. Repeat. Every night he walked the edges of the property and listened. He didn't listen with ears. He listened with the part of him that felt pressure in space, like fingertips on a bruise. When a ward hummed wrong, he stopped and fixed it. When the forest felt too quiet, he didn't assume it was peace. He assumed it was waiting. Edward shadowed him for the first few nights. Silent, irritated, useful. "You don't sleep," Edward said once, voice flat. Stephen didn't look up from the faint glowing line he was tightening between two trees. "I rest," he said. Edward frowned. "That isn't the same." Stephen finally glanced at him. "No," he said. "It isn't." Some nights Carlyle came too. Carlyle asked questions in a calm way that made it hard to be defensive. Stephen respected that. Carlyle didn't try to control him. Carlyle tried to understand him. Alice stopped trying to force visions. Instead, she learned to watch signs. Birds startled too early. A sudden cold pocket in the air. A moment where Edward's mind reading got static, like a radio hit with thunder. In the garage, Stephen turned the concrete floor into a map that kept updating. Lines of light showed where the world felt thin. Most lines stayed dull. One line kept pulling. East. Far away. Toward stone halls and old power. Volterra. The running joke got worse before it got better. Stephen needed a stable, dry space to mark a full anchor circle. The Cullen garage was dry enough. The pack's shed was not. The first time he tried to draw inside La Push again, rain seeped in and smeared 2 hours of work. Stephen stared at the ruined circle like it had personally insulted his medical license. Jacob, standing in the doorway, couldn't help it. He laughed. Stephen didn't even turn. "If you laugh again," he said, calm as a warning sign. I will assign you to hold an umbrella over chalk for 6 hours. Jacob's smile died. That's cruel. It's educational, Stephen replied. The cloak, as if it had opinions about teamwork, floated over and draped itself over the leaking corner of the roof like a living patch. Sam watched that the way you watch a strange animal that might still bite you. That thing always do that. Stephen's mouth flattened. It's trying to save my sanity, he said. Sam grunted. Good luck. The strange part was how fast the pack adjusted. They didn't like vampires. They didn't like strange power. But they understood duty. They understood defending land. So they accepted Stephen as a dangerous tool pointed at a bigger threat. Edward didn't accept him as a tool. Edward accepted him as a problem that happened to be on their side. Bella didn't accept him as either. Bella treated him like a person. That was the most inconvenient thing. One evening, after another round of ward checks, Stephen found Bella in the kitchen. She was alone. The house was quiet. Even the rain seemed softer. Bella was holding a book from the town library. It looked worn and too small to matter. She didn't look up when Stephen entered. Are you leaving? She asked. Stephen paused. Yes, he said. She turned a page slowly. To Volterra? Yes. Bella's fingers tightened around the paper. Because they invited you. Because they're connected, Stephen corrected. Bella finally looked up. Her eyes were tired. You talk like everything is a puzzle, she said. But people live inside the puzzle. Stephen's face didn't change, but his eyes softened a fraction. I know, he said. Bella held his gaze. Then don't treat us like pieces, she said. Stephen didn't answer right away. He looked toward the window, where rain ran down in thin lines. Then he said quietly, I'm trying not to. Bella nodded, like she accepted that struggle as real. If you can stop them, she said, voice steady. Why haven't you already? The question hit harder than it should have. Stephen turned back to her. Because stopping them isn't the hard part, he said. Bella frowned. Then what is? Stephen's voice went low. Stopping them without burning your world down, he said. You live on secrecy. Your enemies use secrecy. If I rip the curtain down, humans die first. Bella's jaw tightened. So we just live with monsters because it's easier. Stephen shook his head once. No, he said. You live with monsters because the alternative is chaos you can't contain. Bella stared. And you can contain chaos, she said. Stephen's mouth twitched. Almost a sad smile. Sometimes, he said, but not without cost. Bella looked down at the book again. You look tired, she said. Stephen didn't deny it. He didn't make a joke. He just said, Thank you for bringing the books. Bella's eyebrows lifted. You actually read them? Stephen picked up one of the local history papers stacked nearby. I read patterns, he said. These books are small, but small things still leave tracks. Bella studied him like she was trying to decide what kind of man he was underneath the power. Then she said, Don't go alone. Stephen met her eyes. I won't, he said. That wasn't a promise of safety. It was a promise of strategy. They did not drive straight into Volterra like tourists. They prepared. Carlyle insisted on calm planning. Sam insisted on boundaries. Edward insisted on contingencies. Stephen insisted on clean lines and a way out. In the end, they went as a tight, uneasy group. Carlyle, Edward, and Alice with Stephen. The wolves did not travel to Italy, but Sam made it clear through phone calls and the pack bond that Forks would be guarded. If Volterra tried anything back home, there would be teeth waiting. Stephen placed one last set of wards around the Cullen house before they left. He didn't show off. He didn't make a speech. He just anchored the lines like someone tying knots. Edward watched him, eyes narrowed. You really think they'll hit us while you're gone? Stephen didn't look up. I think they'll try to learn what I care about, he said. And then they'll squeeze it. Edward's jaw tightened. Then you care about the wrong things. Stephen glanced at him. No, he said. I care about the right things. That's why they'll try. The trip across the ocean felt wrong to Stephen in a way he couldn't fully explain. Not fear, not distance. More like the air itself got heavier with each mile toward Volterra, like the world was leaning into old stone. Alice grew quieter the closer they got. Her visions didn't show clear pictures. They showed flashes, torches, stone, smiles that didn't reach eyes, a red stamp burning across black air. When they finally reached the ancient city, the sun was hidden behind clouds, as if even daylight didn't want to argue here. They walked through streets that felt too still. Then the guards found them. Felix did not pretend to be friendly. He was a wall shaped like a man. His smile held no warmth at all. He looked at Carlyle first, then Edward, then Alice. His gaze landed on Stephen and stayed there. You're the new one, Felix said. Stephen's face stayed calm. I'm the uninvited one, he corrected. Felix's eyes narrowed. You're invited? Stephen didn't blink. Then you don't understand what that word means, he said. Felix's lips pressed into a thin line. He turned without another word and led them down into the stone. The halls of Volterra were clean in a way that felt like control, not care. Torches burned steady. Shadows stayed where they were supposed to. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small. Stephen refused to feel small. But he did feel the crack, not open, not visible. Yet. It was here, beneath the stone, like a hidden vein. The door to the main chamber opened. Aro stood at the center like he was welcoming guests into a theater. He spread his arms, smiling wide and warm, like a grandfather greeting family. Carlyle, Aro said, delighted. My dear friend. Carlyle's face stayed calm. Aro! Aro's eyes glittered as he turned them to Edward and Alice. And the children, he cooed. How wonderful. Then his gaze locked on Stephen, and something in the room shifted. Aro's smile didn't change, but his focus sharpened like a knife finding a seam. And you, Aro said softly. Doctor. Edward stiffened. Alice's breath caught. Stephen's expression remained steady, but his eyes narrowed. Don't call me that, he said. Aro's head tilted, almost playful. Oh, he said. I heard you used to cut people open to save them. Carlyle went still. Edward's eyes went hard. Stephen's voice dropped. You've been digging, he said. Aro clasped his hands together. Digging? He repeated. No, I simply collect knowledge. It's my hobby. Stephen stared at him. Your hobby is control. Aro laughed lightly, as if Stephen had said something charming. Control is safety, Aro said. Safety is mercy. We keep your species asleep. We keep ours alive. Order, Dr. Strange. That is what we offer. The full name hit the room like a bell. Edward's eyes widened, a rare crack in his calm. He looked at Stephen, as if the man had become a legend in a single sentence. Alice's eyes flickered, trying to see around the moment. Carlyle looked at Stephen with quiet shock. Strange, he murmured, not sure if it was a name or a description. Stephen didn't react to the surprise. He kept his focus on Aro. Aro's smile widened, pleased by the effect. Now, Aro said, voice gentle, let us speak as civilized beings. Two figures stepped forward from the shadows behind Aro. Jane. Small. Still. Eyes like knives. Alec. Quiet. Watching. Stephen felt the room like a trap built out of gifts. He didn't flinch. Aro gestured grandly. "You've seen our world," Aro said. "Its secrecy, its fragile balance, and now you've brought something else." Stephen's gaze sharpened. "I didn't bring it," he said. "You invited it." Aro's eyes sparkled. "Invited?" he said, innocent. "My dear Dr. Strange, you accuse me of such things." Stephen took one step forward. Not aggressive, just certain. "I saw the seal inside the tear," Stephen said. "Crimson, ordered, intentional. Not from this world's nature. That means someone is pressing a pattern onto the crack to keep it open." Aro's smile stayed warm. "Patterns," he echoed. "Such beautiful things." Stephen's voice went harder. "Stop," he said. For the first time, Aro's smile thinned. "Stop," Aro repeated, softly amused. "And if I do not?" Stephen looked around the chamber, then back. "Then I seal the crack with or without your cooperation," he said. "And I do it in a way that makes your secrecy harder to keep." Caius, standing off to the side like a simmering wound, stepped forward. "Threats," Caius hissed, "in our home." Aro lifted one hand, quieting him. Aro's gaze stayed locked on Stephen. "You're powerful," Aro said. "We've all heard. You bend space. You hide battles. You move worlds into mirrors. That is remarkable." Stephen didn't respond. Aro leaned in, voice softer now, like an offer meant for a private ear. "But your power has a flaw," Aro said. "You care." Stephen's eyes narrowed. Aro gestured to Carlyle, Edward, and Alice. "You've already attached yourself," Aro said, smiling. "And that is not weakness. That is leverage." Edward's hands clenched. Stephen's voice stayed low. "Say what you want," he said. Aro's smile returned fully. "I want partnership," Aro said. "You and I could make this world." "Quiet." Stephen stared. "Quiet," he repeated. Aro spread his arms. "Imagine it," he said. "No accidents. No humans stumbling into things. No messy witnesses. If something goes wrong, you hide it. If someone breaks secrecy, you remove the memory. You can do that, can't you?" Stephen's face went still. Not because he couldn't, because he had. In another life, with different rules, he had been tempted by control before. He had paid for it. Aro watched the flicker in Stephen's eyes and smiled like a fisherman feeling a tug. "You could save so many," Aro whispered. "You could end the fear. You could make the world stable." Caius stepped forward again, impatient. "Or we kill him," Caius spat. Aro didn't look at Caius. "No," he said calmly. "We don't kill doors. We use them." Jane's eyes locked on Stephen. She lifted her chin slightly. The pain gift hit like a sudden crushing weight meant to fold a person from the inside. Edward's eyes flared. Carlyle's hands tightened. Stephen's shoulders dipped a fraction. Then he inhaled once. Slow. He turned his head toward Jane and stared at her like she was a rude noise. Stephen lifted 2 fingers and drew a small circle in the air. The pressure vanished, cleanly, like a switch flipped off. Jane blinked. She tried again, face hardening. Nothing. Stephen's voice was calm. "No," he told her. "That won't work." Jane's face twisted with rage and confusion. She wasn't used to hearing no. Caius snarled. Felix shifted, ready to launch. Aro lifted a hand again, still calm, still smiling. "Jane," Aro said softly. "Enough." Jane froze, jaw tight. Stephen turned back to Aro. "Your offer is control dressed as mercy," Stephen said. "I don't do that anymore." Aro's smile softened, almost sad. "Such a shame," he said. "You would have enjoyed order." Stephen's gaze sharpened. "You don't want order," he said. "You want ownership." Aro's eyes glittered. "Sometimes they're the same," he said. Stephen didn't argue that. He knew it could be true. He changed the subject with a blade-like directness. "You're feeding the crack," he said. "By pulling conflict, by using Victoria, by pushing the wolves and vampires toward each other. That isn't protection. That's a weapon." Aro's smile didn't move, but something behind it tightened. "Victoria is a nuisance," Aro said lightly. "If she was involved, it was accidental." Stephen's voice went flat. "Lie," he said. Caius exploded. "How dare you?" Stephen's hand lifted, not as a threat, as a fact. A golden ring appeared around Caius's feet and locked him in place like a circle of iron. Caius's snarl cut off as he realized he couldn't step forward. The room went silent. Felix tensed, ready to attack. Stephen's gaze swept the guards once. "If you rush me," he said calmly, "you will end up on the ceiling. Don't embarrass yourselves." Edward stared. Even he couldn't deny it now. This wasn't a fight they could win by speed. This was a fight of rules. Carlyle stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. "Aro," he said, "if you're risking the world for power, you have to stop." Aro looked at Carlyle like Carlyle was a disappointing student. "My dear friend," Aro sighed, "I am stopping chaos. I'm simply guiding it." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind being exposed," he said. Aro's smile sharpened. "Exposed to whom?" he asked. "Humans? They will not believe you. Vampires? They fear us. Wolves? They hate you." Stephen's voice stayed even. "Exposed to the crack," he said. "It feeds on invitation. It feeds on permission. You've been giving it both." Aro's head tilted, eyes bright with curiosity. "And what will you do about that, Dr. Strange?" Stephen took a slow breath. He didn't look at Aro. He looked at Carlyle, Edward, and Alice. Then he spoke with the tone of someone setting terms in a room full of weapons. "I need a witness," Stephen said. Edward frowned. "A witness for what?" Stephen's gaze was steady. "For truth," he said. "The crack is using secrecy as a hiding place. It rides inside half-spoken rules. I'm going to cut that." Carlyle's face tightened. "Stephen." Stephen's voice softened, but didn't weaken. "I'm not exposing your species to the world," he said. "I'm exposing a lie to the thing that feeds on it." Alice's eyes widened. "How?" Stephen didn't answer yet. He lifted his hands and drew a portal. Not a normal portal. This one opened into a space of gray glass and sharp angles. The mirror dimension. Edward's posture snapped into readiness. "You're moving us." Stephen nodded. "Yes," he said, "because I'm not doing this in your courtroom." Aro's smile widened. "Oh," he said, delighted. "How dramatic." Stephen stepped through first. The cloak followed. Carlyle went next. Calm but tense. Edward and Alice followed, wary. Aro stepped through with no fear at all, as if he was walking into a museum. Jane and Felix followed, because of course they did. In the mirror dimension, Volterra became a hard, silent copy of itself. Torches froze like still images. Shadows became clean cuts. The air felt like it had no softness left. Stephen turned and looked at Aro. "Here," he said. "Your tricks matter less." Aro clasped his hands, eyes shining. "And yours matter more," he whispered. Stephen ignored the admiration. He stretched one hand out and pulled. A thin line of light appeared in the air, trailing backward through space like a thread leading home, not to another universe, to Forks, to the treaty line, to the wards he had placed. Edward's eyes widened. "You connected it." Stephen nodded once. "Anchor network," he said. Aro's gaze sharpened. "You built a system," Aro said, pleased. "Clever." Stephen didn't smile. "I built a leash," he corrected. "For the crack." He lifted his other hand and traced a second line. This line went to La Push. A third line went to the Cullen house. A fourth line went, like a knife point, straight into Volterra's core. Aro's smile thinned. "Careful," he warned softly. Stephen's voice stayed calm. "I am," he said. Then Stephen did something that made Edward's mind go blank with shock. Stephen opened a portal to Forks, not to the town, to the Cullen garage, and through that portal stepped Bella Swan. She stumbled forward, eyes wide, as the mirror dimension hit her senses, like stepping into a nightmare made of glass. "Stephen!" Bella snapped, furious and scared. "What?" Edward moved to her instantly. "Bella!" Stephen raised one hand, holding them both in place with a simple, invisible pressure. Not painful, just firm. "Listen," Stephen said, voice sharp. "I need you here for 1 minute." Bella stared at him, breathing hard. "You promised." "I promised strategy," Stephen said. "This is strategy." Bella's eyes flicked to Aro, to Jane, to the guards. The fear hit her like a wave. Aro smiled at Bella with perfect politeness. "Ah," he said, "the human heart." Bella's voice shook, but she forced it steady. "What is this?" Stephen's gaze stayed on Bella. "You asked me why I don't just stop them," he said. "This is why. Because stopping them isn't hard. Keeping your world from shattering is hard." Bella swallowed. Stephen spoke quickly now, like a surgeon calling steps. "Bella," Stephen said, "I need you to say one thing, clearly." While looking at Aro, Bella's eyebrows pulled together. "What?" Stephen's eyes were intense. "Tell him you know what he is," Stephen said, "and tell him you're here by choice." Edward snapped. "No!" Stephen's voice cut through. "Edward," he said, "trust me for 30 seconds." Edward's jaw clenched so hard it looked like stone might crack. Bella stared at Stephen, then at Aro. Aro's smile stayed warm, curious. Bella's hands shook. Then she lifted her chin, stubborn as ever. "I know what you are," Bella said to Aro, voice clear. "I'm here by choice." Aro's eyes glittered. "Brave," he murmured, "or foolish." Stephen turned his gaze to Sam's line on the network. He reached through it, not pulling bodies, but pulling meaning. He spoke, and the air carried his words along the anchor to La Push, like a phone call reality couldn't ignore. "Sam," Stephen said, voice steady, "I need you to repeat the treaty vow, out loud, with intent." In Forks, far away, Sam felt the pressure hit the pack bond like a wave. He didn't understand the method, but he understood the purpose. Sam spoke, and the vow rose into Stephen's network as a hard, clean line. "We protect the land," Sam said. "We keep humans safe. We do not break the line." Stephen turned to Carlyle. "Carlyle," he said, "say your oath." Carlyle's eyes softened, then steadied. He spoke like a doctor who had promised to never become a monster. "I will not take human life," Carlyle said. "I will protect what I can. I will not be ruled by hunger." Stephen looked at Edward. "Edward," he said. Edward's eyes were hard, but there was something else there too now. Understanding. Edward spoke, voice tight. "I will not harm her," he said. "I will not let fear make me cruel." Stephen nodded once. Then he faced Aro. Aro watched all of this with delighted interest, as if he was watching a new kind of dance. Stephen's voice went cold. "And you," Stephen said, "have been inviting the crack by hiding behind order." Aro smiled softly. "Order is not a crime," he said. Stephen lifted both hands. The crimson seal flared in the air between them, like a stamp trying to press down. Aro's smile widened. "There it is," he whispered. "Beautiful." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "You can't hide it now," he said. "Not with a human witness present. not with both sides of your world stating their rules out loud. Bella's breath hitched. What does that do? Stephen's voice stayed simple. It removes the fog, he said. The crack uses fog. Arrow's eyes sharpened. For the first time, his smile faltered. Dr. Strange, Arrow said softly, warning in his voice now. You don't understand what you're touching. Stephen's jaw tightened. I understand enough, he said. He drew a circle in the air with both hands. Not chalk. Not fragile. Light. A circle that didn't care about rain. The circle locked onto the crimson seal like a clamp. The seal tried to resist. Then Stephen spoke one final line, clear and direct. You don't have permission, he said. The words weren't just words. They were the point. All the vows, all the spoken rules, all the clear intent from wolves, vampires, and a human who knew the truth. Together, they formed a boundary the crack couldn't slip through. The crimson seal flickered. Arrow's eyes widened slightly. The seal split, like a stamp tearing in half. A sound ran through the mirror dimension, not loud, sharp, like a thread snapping. The pressure Stephen had felt for weeks eased, not gone, but reduced. The door didn't vanish forever. It stopped being held open by someone's hand. Stephen exhaled slowly. Jane stared, furious. Arrow! Arrow lifted a hand, stilling her. He looked at Stephen like he was seeing him for the first time, not as a toy, as a rival, as a problem that couldn't be bought easily. Arrow's smile returned, smaller now. Clever, he said softly. You used truth like a blade. Stephen didn't lower his guard. And you used secrecy like a leash, he replied. We're done. Arrow's eyes glittered. For today, he said. Felix shifted. Ready. Stephen's voice stayed calm. If you try to reopen that door, he said, I will feel it instantly. And next time, I won't come to talk. Caius, still trapped in Stephen's ring, snarled helplessly. Arrow's gaze flicked to Caius, then back. He smiled again, polite and dangerous. We will consider your request, he said. Stephen didn't correct the word. He just moved. He opened a portal behind Bella. Edward grabbed her and pulled her through. Carlyle followed. Alice rushed through, eyes wide. Stephen lingered one heartbeat longer, staring at Arrow. Arrow leaned forward slightly, voice like silk. You could have been family, he said. Stephen's expression didn't change. I already chose my job, he said. Then Stephen stepped through. The portal closed. Volterra's mirror copy went silent behind them. Back in Forks, the rain hit like a welcome and an insult at the same time. Bella sat on the Cullen couch, shaking, wrapped in a blanket she didn't need, but wanted anyway. Edward paced like a caged animal. Carlyle stood near the fireplace, calm face tight with thought. Alice stared at the wall, eyes unfocused. Then she blinked and finally breathed. I can see again, she whispered. Not clear, but less blank. Stephen stood near the window, watching the trees. Edward rounded on him. You brought Bella to Volterra, he snapped. You used her. Stephen didn't flinch. I needed a human witness, he said. You don't have many who already know the truth and won't break under it. Bella's head snapped up. So I was useful, she said, anger rising through fear. Stephen turned to her. His voice softened, but stayed honest. You were brave, he said. And yes, you were useful. Those can both be true. Bella's eyes narrowed. You promised strategy, she said. I did, Stephen said. That was the strategy. Bella stared at him for a long moment, then looked away, jaw tight. Edward's voice was low. If she died, Stephen's eyes flashed. She didn't, he said. Edward's hands clenched. Stephen's voice lowered, controlled. If you want to be angry, he said, be angry. But don't pretend you wouldn't have traded your safety for hers 100 times over. Edward froze. Because it was true. Carlyle spoke quietly. Is it over? He asked. Stephen looked back at the forest. No, he said. But the crack isn't being held open anymore. The pressure is lower. Alice swallowed. And Oro? Stephen's mouth flattened. He won't stop wanting control, he said. But he'll have to change methods. Bella whispered. So what now? Stephen's gaze stayed steady. Now, he said, we keep the network. We keep the boundaries strong. And if the door tries to open again, we respond fast. Edward stared at him. You're staying. It wasn't a question. Stephen didn't answer right away. Then he said, for now, he replied. Bella's eyes widened. You can't go home? Stephen's voice stayed simple. I can, he said, but not safely yet. If I open the wrong path, I might drag that door with me. Carlyle nodded slowly. So you stay in guard, he said. Stephen looked at Carlyle. Yes, he said, because someone has to. The cloak fluttered, like it was proud and annoyed at the same time. Edward exhaled slowly. He still didn't trust Stephen, but he understood him better now. And that, somehow, was scarier. Rain fell on the cliff line outside town, steady and cold. Stephen stood alone among the trees, coat pulled tight, the cloak resting on his shoulders like a tired friend. He had drawn a small ward in the dirt anyway, even though the rain would wash it away. Not because the ward needed to last, because the action needed to be repeated. Stephen closed his eyes and listened. The network hummed faintly across the land. Treaty Line, Cullen House, La Push. Quiet anchors that now held the world's edges tighter than before. The crack was still there, somewhere in the deep structure of things. But it wasn't screaming. It wasn't pulling as hard. For now, that was enough. Behind him, footsteps approached lightly. Stephen opened his eyes and turned. Alice stood a few feet away, holding a small stack of books in her arms. They looked almost funny in this rain-soaked forest, like someone bringing homework to a war zone. I got you something, she said. Stephen stared at the books. More library treasures? He asked. Alice's mouth twitched. Don't, she warned, but her eyes were warmer than they had been in days. It's not much, but it's what we have. Stephen took the books carefully, like they mattered. He glanced at the top one. Local myths, old legends, stories of cold ones and spirit wolves. He nodded once. Thank you, he said. Alice stepped closer, rain speckling her hair. I can see. A few weeks, she said softly. Not everything, but you're still here, and the house is still standing. Stephen's mouth flattened. That's a low bar, he said. Alice smiled anyway. Forks is a low bar, she said. Stephen looked out at the trees again. It's strange, Alice added, voice quiet. You came here like a disaster. Stephen didn't deny it. And now, Alice said, you're part of the balance. Stephen's eyes stayed on the forest. I'm not part of your politics, he said. Alice shrugged. You're part of our story, she said. Stephen didn't answer, because that was the problem. Stories spread, legends form, and legends attract attention. He felt that attention already, like distant eyes turning. Not just the Volturi, not just the crack. Other watchers in other corners of reality, noticing a sorcerer who had chosen to stand guard in a small, rainy town. Stephen tightened his grip on the books. Alice watched him. Do you regret it? She asked. Stephen thought of the moment the crimson seal tore, the moment the pressure eased, the moment the door lost its hand. He thought of Bella's fear, Edward's fury, Carlyle's steady vow, Sam's hard line spoken into the dark. Then he said, simple and honest. "No," he replied. Alice nodded, satisfied. Stephen looked down at the ward in the dirt. Rain blurred its edges. He drew it again. A clean line, a clear circle, a repeated promise. Then he stood, books under his arm, and faced the forest like it was a patient that needed constant care. The rain kept falling. The world kept turning. But the door stayed closed. For now.